Hey, this is Andy and welcome to another IBM Rational Systems and Software Solutions demonstration. Today we'll be talking about the View Builder introduced in Rational Engineering Lifecycle Manager version 5. If you're already familiar with RELM views, you'll know how powerful they are, giving our engineering data context and presenting it in a graphical way. You'll also know that they are the easiest things in the world to build. Creating them requires knowledge of the Sparkle query language. Well, not anymore. RELM 5.0 makes creating views incredibly straightforward. Views can be built easily using a drag-and-drop interface, no Sparkle required. Views are built using artifact elements, which are essentially reusable parameterized queries. RELM ships with a collection of these elements out of the box, but you will need to deploy them into the project before you can use them. If you don't know how to do that, check out this article on jazz.net. Artifact elements are extensible. You can define your own for specific domains or specific projects. And don't worry, the old tree and grid layouts are still there, so you can always build views by hand should you wish to. Let's take a look. Here in RELM, I've already deployed the artifact elements into this project, and I've created a blank view. When you drag an artifact element onto the canvas, it becomes a container. In this case, I'm dragging on a model element. Before the container is created, you can fill in any of the parameters to filter the content of the container down. Here, let's apply a particularly stringent filter. Let's search for a specific element from our Design Manager area. A use case. Next, we can add a second container, but we'll do it by exploring links from the first one. Let's see any requirements that are satisfied by that use case. RELM adds a container and draws in the connections. Notice the dashed arrow between the containers? That only appears at design time, and it allows you to manipulate the connections. We could change their formatting or shape, or even hide them entirely. Next, let's see what child elements are under that use case by exploring that link. After the container has been created, we can edit its parameters to filter the content down to what we want. Here, let's filter that box to only show us child use cases. Let's explore further and see any associated diagrams from that child use case. Here in 5.0, diagrams can be shown as mini previews of the actual diagrams themselves. Of course, these are just containers, so we can always manipulate them after they've been created. For example, we could switch this one to use the default node. Here's another neat trick. Let's say we're not concerned with the child use cases, only the diagrams related to it. We can hide any container and RELM will jump the gap, redrawing the connections as necessary. We can always get those hidden containers back by accessing that dashed line menu. Next, we'll add a container that shows all the elements on those diagrams. Now that might potentially be a lot of elements, so here's another neat trick. You can tell RELM to stop trying to populate containers while you're designing, and then switch it back on again when you're ready. Here we'll add the container for the diagram elements, but before we get RELM to process it, we'll edit its parameters and filter it to show only operations. Then when we switch on loading again, the container becomes populated. Here's the next neat trick. Let's say we want to see all the requirements that those operations satisfy, but we don't want them shown in a new container. We already have an existing container we want to populate. We can do that by dragging from one container to another. First, let's hide these connections just to make things a little clearer. Next, if I hover over the operations container, you'll notice these orange arrows that appear on the boundary. If you use your mouse to drag a line from one of those connectors to any other container, RELM assesses all the possible paths between those artifact element types and presents those paths to you. Now those paths could be any number of segments long, and we'll use that to our advantage in a few moments' time. Here I'm going to select Model Element Satisfied Requirements. RELM draws in connections to the requirements that are already there, and adds requirements if they're not. Now you have gap analysis. Some of these requirements are satisfied by use cases, but not the corresponding operations. And some are satisfied by operations, but they aren't part of the use case. Okay, one more useful technique for today. Let's add a new diagram element with one of those sequence diagrams in it. Next, I'm going to switch off loading, and I'll drag a requirement artifact element onto the canvas, but I won't fill in any of the parameters. Now, if I hadn't switched off loading, the likelihood is that that container would now be populated with every requirement in my database. Before I switch loading back on, I'm going to filter that container by dragging a link from the diagram and then selecting a path. Now remember I said that those paths could be any number of segments long. That means we can skip across containers and add links directly. For example, here I can select diagram, diagram elements, satisfied requirements. When I switch on loading, RELM draws in those connections, skipping the containers in between. If I want to see the containers that RELM skipped, I can simply make them visible. Well, that's all for today, folks. As you can see, building views in RELM 5.0 is simple, easy, and incredibly powerful. Be sure to check out the other videos in this series and, of course, our web links for more information.